Okay.
All right, we good. Y'all know the vibes. More kicks than Cobra Kai. Busting shots every time we rolling by. Lush World with another installment. We are back on our mental health journey, focusing on individuals that have achieved extraordinary things in their lives, despite making a sharp left at times and going on an alternative path when it comes to drug abuse, alcoholism, and the various pitfalls that happen in modern day society. Joining us today is a good friend of mine. Some of y'all may know him as a battle rapper, COMA. Some of y'all may know him as an incredible music artist who goes by Gray Smith. I know him by both of those, but as well as Steve Hall. What's cracking with you, Steve?
Hey man, glad to be here. I don't think that's the second time I've received a Lush One intro, and it never gets old. Let's
Yeah,
go.
we gonna need to make it a more frequent thing. Hopefully, get you
Yeah.
back in that ring. You feel me?
Oh,
Joust some of these MCs up.
let me know. Let me know when Lux is ready to die, and I'll step up to the plate.
Hey, for those who don't know though, he says that in jest, but my boy has got one of the nastiest pens, and is an incredible. As good of a battle rapper he is, he's a great songwriter, multi instrumentalist as well.
Yeah, it's all here. It's we're in the studio right now for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, my boy gets stupid busy and has really like deep conceptual, multi-layered records that people even outside of the yeah, I mean, I consider you a hip hop artist, but you're more than that, you know.
Sure.
So while you say like you joke about battling Lux, it's not outside of the realm of possibility or feasibility for you to go head to head with the best in the game, in my humble opinion.
Appreciate that. Skill wise, I don't agree. Money wise, that's where things start to fall apart. I don't got the money to pay that man, you know? Uh,
That's another conversation.
yeah,
But
for sure.
Steve, I you have a crazy inspirational story. Looking at where you are right now
Sure.
compared to what you've gone through, I mean, all of us in recovery that what do you know what the percentages are since you do run a treatment center, you own and operate your own treatment center? What is the percentage of people who attempt to get clean that wind up clean past the first year?
I mean, those metrics, the only official studies that have been done by unsavory characters that want to promote the efficacy of the drugs that they're selling. So I don't know if there's any information that is reliable on that. I know within anonymous fellowships, which are widely hailed as the most successful modality for long-term remission from active drug addiction, they don't take notes. They're anonymous, right? So I will say that the number is not nearly as high as I want it to be. And
Right. Yeah. With that being said, both of us have defied the odds, and that's not to discourage other people because we want to encourage as many people to get clean however they can and to
sure.
stay clean. So we're not here being like you can't do this, but it's difficult. It's and the odds are against us. But you know, before you get into your story, I kind of just want to let people know about a lot of people within battle rap culture have reached out to you over the years when it comes to being curious about getting clean,
Sure.
from just like states of curiosity to pure unadulterated desperation, tears in their eyes, pitiful incomprehensible demoralization, and reaching out to you for help.
Yeah.
Me amongst them. And when we met, I was in a really dark period in my life. Unfortunately, as someone who spent the majority of his life in active addiction, the majority of my life has been somewhat of a dark period. And you always were there for me and kind of tried to, as good as you can, to gently to a good path without being imposing your will too much on it, because you can't help people that don't want to get helped. But when I finally did get sober, you and I became very close, and you've
Yeah.
just been kind of like a template and a roadmap for for me in a lot of ways on how to do this, and even the difficulties that arise in recovery. So
Sure.
let's get back to the point of origin. You're born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland.
So I'm from a place called Greenbelt, which is actually closer to DC than
Okay.
it is to Baltimore, but it is in Maryland. Yeah. And
And
to speak on the things that you just said, first of all, it's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that. Um, that kind of happened organically. I think by nature of the character that I wanted to represent in the battle rap space was just look, battle rap was an accident, man. Like I was sponsoring this guy and he was a grind time guy for a long time. And I found out about him like, yo, you gotta go back to that, bro. And he told me that he wouldn't do it unless I did. And so I took this battle and we'll get into that, how that whole thing took off. But when I
you
got
were
in,
already rapping.
yeah, sure. I mean, it's always been a part of my thing, and we'll get into that in a second too, like how it kind of came to be. But just about the me being that character in the community, man, I think I was so forthright with my history with those things that it kind of just became this flashpoint and a point of reference for people that kind of knew, like, because at first, when I first got clean, man, I was insecure about being the clean guy in the room because I was headed, battle rap was an accident. Music was always my thing, and I was headed back to the music industry. And um, my I had 9 months clean. I moved back to New York to, pursue making records, and like a whole bunch of people found out I got cleans from all these cool bands, and they all showed up. And yeah, and the cocaine happened real quick. It's on the mixing console, like in the second day, I think. And I was insecure about being clean because I was raised under the false information that in order to make brilliant music or art that you had to subject yourself to that kind of degradation with drugs or that enhance the creativity. And that's, yeah, if there's any lie that I'm here to kill, it's that one. But that kind of resonated into the battle rap thing. And it wasn't like, yo, he can help you. It's more just like he understands it, and I would put that in my content pretty frequently. So um yeah, one thing led to another, and I started getting phone calls in the middle of the night from people because battle rap is a beautiful mosh pit that has brilliant minds and a whole bunch of feelings and very little tools to deal with them. So drugs are pretty ubiquitous in that space, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, growing up, the town you grew up in, which is it like a suburb of DC? Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Or
that's an accurate representation. I'd say the DC line's maybe about 15 minutes away. So we're right
and
there.
is it predominantly black where you grew up, or is it kind of mixed?
In my little suburb, it was probably split down the middle. But I'd say that area, which is PG County, is largely black overall, but Greenbelt was like a little pocket of caucasity. So there's some of us in there. Yeah.
And so, what was your childhood like?
I had a great childhood. And I say that to people that think that, all of us have to have these love absent abusive upbringings in order to become addicts in life. And that's just not remotely true. But yeah, there was some stuff, my dad left when I was 6. And as an adult, I've examined the impact that had on me. But my childhood growing up, I was always the hyper brilliant kid in class that couldn't behave. And it's not as simple as saying I was bored. Like it was more like attention seeking. I wanted to be accepted into the tribe, but I also wanted to be designated as special and above the rest of them. And so it was this constant confusing thing. I would make these overtures to be included, but the moment I was included, I wanted to be special, and that didn't really lend to forming effective social relationships. And then speaking of doing things to gain acceptance, there was some kind of like virginity is like, yo, who's the first one to have sex? It was also like, who's the first one to get in a good fist fight? and there was some stupid bullshit that happened. I hadn't gotten in a fight yet in my friend group, so I, this guy said something to a girl, and I stepped up, and I hit him, and and I didn't stop hitting him, and I hurt him really badly. And he was smaller than me. Like, please don't think this is a tough guy story at all.
You
Uh,
sounded like Superman for a second there.
Yeah, no, it was completely fabricated. I just used any excuse I could to find a way to put my hands on someone so that I could finally be in the cool crowd. I wanted to be known as a tough guy, as a fighter. And what happened after I hit him the first time was a whole bunch of anger that I didn't know I had came up. And I hurt him really badly. And this was the first week of the seventh grade. And they locked me up in a place called Boys Village, which is a quaint hamlet in the Maryland countryside. And
So the very first fight you got in led to incarceration.
I mean, I damaged him really bad. I remember they showed me the Polaroid when they booked me, and it it was disgusting, you know. And yeah, and so I got locked up, and and I never came home. I I was there, and then I would catch a charge while I was in there, and and they would bounce me from this facility to that facility, or sometimes they'd send me out on a bracelet, and I'd cut that shit off, and then they'd apprehend me. But my entire adolescence was one of punitive and psychiatric facilities. And there were little spurts here or there after a couple of years I'd come home, but I just couldn't stay gone. I would always end up back, violation of probations and stuff like that. So um yeah, and in those facilities I was abused heavily, sexually, physically, all manner of things. I think it really started to take a turn when the staff in those facilities started to join in those things. That one of the guy on night duty would pop the cell block, and like guys would come in and yank me off the top of the bed and in a blanket and beat the shit out of me. And I think the part that pissed me off the most was that they would just laugh while they did it. It wasn't beef, it was abuse. And yeah, eventually it was like, all right, I got to stick up for myself. And um
Are
uh
you a lot younger than the other guys in there?
no, I mean, we're all between like 12 and 17, but I was the only white guy in there ever. Like, I watch all these Netflix documentaries about like the Aryan Brotherhood and like prisons segregated by race, and like I don't have any like aspirations of joining the Nazis, but like, yo, when I saw this documentary, I was like, where the fuck were they at? Like, I didn't even have an option to join anyone, So yeah, the fights kept happening, and yeah, I'd win. Eventually I started like learning how to throw my hands. I'd win some, and then like if I won one on a Monday, then on Tuesday he'd get me back, and it was just gladiator camp, man. And I'm glad that place is shut the fuck down. But it was tough going through that, man, because like you're dealing with no guidance whatsoever in an emotional way. You hear all this bullshit about be a man. I don't know if there's anything more antithetical to being a man than engaging in stupid ass violence against someone for no reason other than your own entertainment. It doesn't seem very manly to me at this juncture in my life, but that
Well, I
was
mean, at the end of the day, those aren't men; they're kids still, right? Like,
sure trying to be those, right? And so um yeah, and I kept getting in trouble in those places, and it was a surprise to no one that by the time I aged out that I was a fucking monster that didn't have any tools to deal with his emotions, or any meaningful way to find my way forward.
I mean, so
So
you basically your first 12, 13 years of your life, you grew up in a relatively loving households and
sure.
somewhat idyllic suburban existence to an extent, and then from the time that you basically are starting to grow hair on your nuts to
Yeah,
the remainder of your high school years, you're incarcerated in a horrific environment. And
sure.
do you feel like you still bear the scars of the trauma that was caused?
I mean, quite literally, I got a couple of them, on my body, but like I wouldn't go with idyllic to describe my child. We were poor as fuck, but I didn't know it because I didn't have any point of reference. There wasn't a
Right.
rich street, but yeah, I mean, very early on, when my dad left, the church took us in and they would pass us from house to house. And, um, I wouldn't say that uh, I ever experienced anything like financial stability, but I had love
Right.
in
Right.
spades.
You had love.
Yeah,
You
for
had love. So it's like a sharp contrast to the absence of love that you wound up
sure. So yeah, I get tossed in that pit, and it crushed my mom too. And she would tell me all the time on visiting Sunday, like I'm in here with you, and I just yeah, it was weird to hear you say my high school days because I've never been. I've never been to high school a day in my life. It's kind of weird. But yeah.
and
Um
then you wound up not really like having too much experience with girls then throughout all that whole time as well,
Yeah, I
huh?
mean, that's a whole podcast in and of itself, like how I came to know about sex and like what that meant and what it didn't mean, what I thought it meant, and all those things. But before we get out of that slice of my life, that was when rapping started to become a thing for me because in Boys Village and then subsequently this other piece of shit called Riverside Hospital that has been shut down. That was in DC. They made the news. I encourage you and anyone watching to Google Riverside Hospital DC abuse. They were off the chain, but that was when I started to learn that if I wrote some shit in my cell and I came out, and then when all the guys were circled up on the basketball court, I would just step in there and I would start and I would say my piece, and like they would eventually start to come around. So the rap shit for me really was a means of survival because it was the only thing. I couldn't play fucking basketball at all. And that wasn't even besides the fact that I don't have any athletic ability. I couldn't. I never even had two of the same size of shoe. Every day you picked your fucking shoes out of a mountain of shoes. And like, if you got two of the same size, you were someone of prominence in there. And I was never that. So I found that that was something that at least prevented them from treating me as a punching bag every day. And then I got better at it. And then what would happen is like a new guy would come in talking about his rap career, and they would be like, "Yo, we gotta go get the white boy." And so they would pull me out of the cell, and they would like make me listen to him, and then I would just eat his ass up. And like that got me a lot. That was the first thing I found that got me um, anything other than scorn and exclusion. So it really quickly became like a fucking life raft for me, and so yeah, I had a lot of time to myself, and my entire incarceration career was reading and then reading Dostoevsky and then writing shit about fucking someone's bitch, which I had never done. But that doesn't make me unique in the field of rap, for sure.
Par for the course.
Yeah, right.
That's okay. That's like a like so to you then the art of rapping and hip hop is probably a lot deeper than it is to a lot of people because that literally a lot of people throw it around the cliche, but sounds like hip hop low key saved your life to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely saved me from a lot more time in the infirmary. That's for sure. Unless one guy swung on me in the middle of a rap thing one time, but that was okay. I would have swung on me too if I was him. That was a particularly sharp day for your boy. Uh,
Do you remember any punchlines that you said during that era?
oh man, not that I'm willing to say on here. Not that, yeah, they were so fucking bad. Yeah,
You're gonna have to tell me afterwards.
yeah.
You I want to just commend you on how candidly, openly, and fearlessly you speak on this experience,
Oh yeah,
especially, like bringing up the sexual abuse, which a lot of men have a hard time speaking on, but it's so much more common than people would care to admit. So, hopefully
yeah,
that
sure.
inspires other people to do the same.
Yeah, well, so that's part of why I speak openly about that stuff. And the other thing was, I never categorized it as sexual abuse until later in my life because it wasn't sexual. I mean, not to get graphic, but it wasn't like I was being raped by men for sexual gratification. It was like, this group of guys at this one facility would like hold me down and like broomsticks, and just to humiliate me. You know what I mean? It wasn't, so I was like, was that sexual abuse? And like it certainly was. I mean, it's sodomy, right? And um, I've dealt with that I mean, this is nothing. I speak about this shit in front of tens of thousands of people on a regular basis, and I do understand the therapeutic benefit of it because of, when I hear other people talk about that stuff, if I don't talk about it, I'll use over it. I'll tell you that, and those are kind of the deeper things. But yeah, you're very welcome, man. I don't. What am I supposed to do? I was fucking 13 years old, right? Like a cell pops and they come in the five or six guys. When am I supposed to be too tough to let that happen? I was until they knocked me unconscious, right? Like there's no bravado in that. There's no fucking like I don't know of anyone else that would have done anything differently. Five or six guys pop the cell and come in when you're 13. Like, what are you gonna do? Yell loud enough and intimidate them? Like, it's not realistic, right? And then in the recovery world, I lean on that experience anytime I'm confused or I forget what powerlessness really is. Powerlessness is when the driving force of your life is beyond your control. And yeah, it's important to embrace that. And yeah, you're welcome. I have no problem talking about that stuff, man.
Nah, I mean, I think that a lot of people don't really. You said something key when you're like, if I don't speak on it, I'll use over it. And
Sure.
I think a lot of people don't realize that the pain and the trauma that we keep to ourselves winds up basically imprisoning us, and that's
Sure.
our cross to bear until we take the power away by speaking on it and find other people that we can relate to and carrying that message, and it helps other people who can't verbalize or are at a point where they're not able to verbalize what they're going through. And then it's just, the whole it transmutates into a positive force in a really abstract way. But so were you, during this time of incarceration, like these are the formative years where most of us are smoking weed, drinking, popping pills for our first time.
Mm-hmm.
Were you getting high at all, or what was that like?
Sure. Of course, before I even went in there, I was getting high. Like I started doing all types of shit young as fuck. And then I guess it's okay to let this out of the bag now. Every year, my um I'd have a different fictional member of my family die. Um, because so I could go to the funeral. But actually what I was doing was going to something called the HF Festival. My mom would take me from whatever facility I was at and drop me off at RFK Stadium, and I would go all day and just listen to the most awesome rock music in the world, and get fucking blasted, all kinds of shit, and then have to be back by 9 p.m. So it's like, that happened a couple of times, and I'd say the first 2 or 3 years, the lockup shit was consistent, and then there started to be some like, okay, he's home now for 2 months, and but he's got to have a bracelet on, and God, I had so many of those fucking ankle bracelets, man. Um,
Did you have consistent homies throughout this time? Did you have like friends
Yeah,
throughout?
we were all locked up together at one point or another, for sure. It was all the same thing, especially in the rehabs, because the move was if you got locked up for something, just tell the judge you were a fucking crackhead and they'd send you to treatment instead of sending you back to Boyd's Village or like the other spots. Like they had this shit up the road called Catoctin, which was like a forestry camp. Where it's like, and there was other places I never went to, this shit called Hickey, and there's other like all these are like Maryland based facilities, but
I
um
mean, we had the same shit in Cali, bro. When I got arrested for the first time at 13, and then at 16, they tried to give me a felony, but instead of sending me to juvie, they sent me to a drug divergence program called Anacapa by the Sea. which is it was basically juvie. You know what I mean? It was the
Well, it
same
seems
thing.
like it worked out great. You lived a
Yeah.
long life after that without any
Yes,
drugs.
saved my life. Nah, fuck no. That place was horrible too, and also got shut down by the state of California. But the whole time you're there, the fear is because if you fuck up, you're not going to juvie afterwards. You go into fucking placement homes and shit. And there's a
Yeah,
gang of those, and those places are, you know, pure hell, pure torture. So I was I thankfully by the grace of God never wound up having to go to any of those other places, but
sure.
Anacapa was bad enough. So I definitely know about them little circuits and how that works, but it's not the place to be in the slightest. You
Sure.
but you're not able to, due to your circumstances at that time, get faded enough to really be like a drug addict, right? Like,
Yeah, no, the real drugs didn't start till later. Um,
so
uh,
what happened once you turned 18 and you aged out of them spots?
um, I was a fucking tornado. I didn't have any emotional awareness of myself. It was he's out, have sex with this chick that you've never known, and like all that stupid gangster bullshit. And then yeah, a lot of drugs. And then I jumped headfirst into started a band, my first band called St. Jude. We made some very incredible music. It was a rock band, some hip hop thrown in there. And but the real pivotal thing that happened when I was 19 was that my mental health started to decline very rapidly. And that's when the bipolar disorder and the panic disorder really surfaced. So my first actual drug addiction, like dependency, was Xanax. And it wasn't even on some party shit. Like I got it from a doctor, bro. I kept going to the ER like every 3 days, and I was just having these panic attacks, and I didn't fucking understand them whatsoever. But all I knew was that the Xanax was the thing that like finally made them stop, as long as I had enough of it, right? So that was the first time I really had like a chemical dependency. Like I was dependent on a drug, and if I didn't get it, I would experience withdrawal and shit like that. And um, so the band kind of went to shit, man. Because I remember like we made it to this spot called the 930 Club, which was like my favorite venue of all time. I wanted to play it, and then fucking we made it, and I was like, yo, I need to stop taking the Xanax, because if I don't, I'm not going to remember playing this venue. And so I stopped taking it, and like that was a mistake. And we played the show, and remember like crowd surfing off the stage and having a fucking seizure, like just that kind of calamity all the time. I'm fucking, seizures and withdrawals and fucking not to mention like I'm just not healthy, man. And those things started to mount. I then what? Psych ward. Try to figure some shit out and go into these psych facilities because it started to surface, right? Like I wasn't okay, to the surprise of no one, but more than just carrying the abuse on my back and the lostness from my adolescence. Like I had severe mental health issues that were chemical in nature that were starting to rear their head. And so, and that's the window for males. It's like 17 to 19. That's when you see it. Females are a little earlier than that. They tend to be like 15 to 18. But that's when, if you are carrying some kind of mental health diagnosis, that is when primacy will arrive, and you'll start to see it in its full form. And that was no surprise. I have a long history of that exact diagnosis in my family. So, um, I started trying to get help from that, and meanwhile, get this band thing off the ground, and just it was a lot of stuff. And then when I
Are
was
you are you is it kind of culture shock even trying to re-immerse yourself in society after kind of being, for the most part, estranged to it
well, that
for
didn't happen until I got clean, because I wasn't there. I was so fucking faded all the time. It still felt like I was locked up. So um, then when I was 22 or 23, um, my buddy, I was staying at the studio trying to make this record, and my buddy called me to his house. It's like, yo, there's some guy from TV here. And so I came to his house, and the guy, Dominic West from The Wire, was on my buddy's roof with like they were having like a house party. And I played some songs on the guitar, and he was just like, "Hey man, your voice is fucking phenomenal." And then he asked me to come play at this fundraiser for The Wire. It was like this auction where they like auction off their time. And so whatever, I went up there, played a couple songs, and then I got drunk as fuck. And I went up to him and I told him, "Hey man, if you ever need someone to piss their pants on TV, I'm your guy." And so yo, he casted me on the fucking show. He wrote me into the show, and then all of a sudden I'm cast on HBO. It's fucking crazy. Didn't plan that one, right? And there's a lot of those in my life.
You're on The Wire.
Yeah. So we're shooting the
One of
show.
the greatest TV series of all time.
Sure. And they sat me down. I watched the whole series from start to finish in like 4 days just to get caught up on some stuff. And I started hanging out with the cast all the time. It was really fucking cool, man.
Knowing me, who do you think is my favorite character on The Wire?
Bubbles.
I fuck with Bubbles. I'm a big Avon Barksdale guy, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so we're shooting the show, and I'm like, yo, I'm okay, mom. I made it. I don't know how, but like I'm on HBO. Let's go. And so they wrote, like, Dominic wrote this fucking character for me and all this other shit. And then they announced that they're just going to cancel the whole fucking show. So I'm here we go, cosmic prank, right? Like, oh, we're gonna get cast on this fucking show. And then they decided to cancel because my whole thing was to be a new character. They started building the story arc in season 5, and then canceled it. We were supposed to go to season 6. They canceled that shit. And I was fucking devastated, man, which is weird because like I never even had any aspiration of being I'm not an actor. I suck at that. I can't do that shit. Like I've never taken an acting lesson in my life, but here I was. And um it fucked me up, man. Fucked me up. And I can remember we were shooting a scene under an overpass. In real life, I got bit by a spider, and it got infected in my abdomen, and I had to go to the hospital. And they did this shit called, they came in and said they had to evacuate the wound, which I didn't know what it meant at the time. That's when they take all the dead shit out of the wound, like necrotic tissue and stuff. And they put Dilaudid in my IV. And
Oh,
yeah, and that
good
was,
stuff.
yeah,
They were
yeah,
always fun until you projectile vomit.
sure. So that happened, and then a month later, the show got canceled, and I was like, I want
And
that.
your character in the show is an addict, correct?
Oh yeah, fuck
So
yeah.
your character in the show is addicted to opiates. You had never really had too much experience with opiates, and then
Percocets here or there, Vicodin, but not anything high grade. No,
here's God's punchline. Now you leave that experience.
as a fucking junkie. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So I was crushed. I got in some legal trouble, got arrested for some super wild shit, which was like the magnum opus of my criminal career: kidnapping, weapons charges, like wild shit. And
Do you feel comfortable delving into that story?
it's not comfortable. I'm just kind of bored of it. It's a long, drawn out piece of shit. Basically, somebody from my neighborhood was jealous that I was on the show, did a whole bunch of wild ass shit. And then I snapped on him and beat his ass just on GP. But then he went back to the guys that had fronted him a whole bunch of drugs and said that I beat his ass and stole the drugs, which was not true. So they tried to kill me, and a whole bunch of other shit happened, and thank God that case went away. Shout out to my baby sister. And yeah, that's all I'll say on that one. But
Kidnapping is crazy.
I'd do it again. That one. That wasn't
Yeah.
some weird misguided thing. They were shooting at me in a fucking crowd at a Labor Day festival, bro. Like that's not Yeah, that wasn't a mistake, right? I was put in a position where, whatever. It sounds like I'm talking about somebody else because I am. Like I'm not that guy anymore, but on that day I would have made the same call, right? So anyway, I only bring it up to say it was time to get the fuck out of Maryland. So I left I went to Nashville just
You
because I
still
looked
wind
up.
up doing time for that though.
No, no, I got arrested. The only time in my life I had enough money to post that kind of bail was right then, thanks to fucking, where I was at in life. And so I got
Do you still
out,
get residuals for that shit?
no comment. And
Okay.
so we saw that whole shit happen. It was time to get the fuck out of Maryland. So as soon as I got out, I looked on Craigslist. I saw Nashville was called Music City, and that was all I needed to know. And so I moved down there with no plan whatsoever. Went down there, bought this big ass house, couple of cars, trying to fill the void. And then I remembered that moment in that fucking ER. And I was like, that's what I want. And so did my thing, found those fucking pills, found some fucking weirdo at this shitty ass dive bar to come back to my house and teach me how to inject this medication. There was no, I never sniffed drugs. It was right to the rail because as far as I was concerned, like the FBI was going to come kick my fucking door in and it was going to be over with. So I was like, let's go out swinging. And I'm down there banging Dilaudid like fucking crazy.
Yeah, because yeah.
Yeah. And then it ran out. And so I just left. I packed up a U-Haul truck with my dog and I left that house. I bought that house. I just left it. Never went back. And I went
So
to New York City. Yeah.
what is it like? I guess because you didn't pay property taxes, it got
Well, so you know what I think happened was this is 2007. I think it got fucking shuffled into the mortgage bubble
uh
and like reclaimed by the bank. And like there was so much going on, which worked out well for me. Right. So I just fucking left and went to New York City back to, I had lived there before in Brooklyn and like just trying to find heroin. That was it. I was just on a tour trying to find fuck because it was like I wasn't an organic junkie. I was a microwave overnight junkie, right? I just started shooting these fucking pills and then yeah, and that was it. And I'm 23 at this point and I ran for a good 3 years. It was fucking insane. And then I ended up on methadone and heroin, and I couldn't feel any of that stuff anymore, despite the budget being like $300 a day. So I started shooting coke on top of that, and coke is what brought me to my knees. It was after shooting the fucking cocaine, man. Like that shit tore me to pieces, and I got clean at 26. And the last day that I used was August 31st, 2010. My clean date, if there is a 31st, I don't even remember. I know that my clean date
yeah.
is September 1st, 2010. And I've been clean since that day, man. And there's a lot of cool parts to that story as well. But
Well, okay. I'm always been curious about this. And it's funny because like your story is a little bit abstract, but different regions in the United States, I mean, really across the world,
yeah.
have different drugs that tend to resonate with them. In the DMV area, in particular, DC and Baltimore, that's heroin central right there. What is it about those areas that you grew up in that why is opiates so prevalent out there?
So half of what you said is true. So Baltimore is heroin city and DC is not. DC
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's
Baltimore for sure. I know
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's out there. But DC, and that was the weird part was like I never fucking used it. I tried to come up here. I live in Baltimore now. I'm in Baltimore City right now. I came up here to try to like get involved with that shit, and I got robbed instantly. And so I just like my whole thing. So like to go back, white privilege is a funny term for me because like literally at the most important junctures in my life, being white sucked. It was a liability. And that was even true of my junkie career. Cause in DC, I mean, bro, I had like track marks on my fucking hands. Like I was a committed junkie, right? And I would go down the one heroin strip in DC and every time I'd walk out and they'd be like, shut it down. And I'm like, God damn, like they always thought I was a fucking cop, man. And I was like, I'm the most committed cop of all time, bro. And like I got abscesses. I was just a dirty fucking flea bag. But I would always find this dude named the Claw. And the Claw got his name because all of the guys would test their drugs on him. His hand was fucking permanently swollen. And if he said it was good, then you knew it was good. So he was like the Punxsutawney Phil of heroin
Yeah,
for
he's a human tester.
yeah. So I'd just get the Claw to get my drugs, and I had to give him a portion of it every day. But yeah, it was a lonely existence being a white heroin addict in DC. Again, the
Also,
only
the motherfucking claw, though. Let's go.
shouts to the Claw, man. He's definitely dead now. He's got to be, but he was a Vietnam veteran, and I met his mother one day. That was fucking. Hi, is the Claw here? I knocked on his door. I couldn't fucking find him. Like I didn't know his fucking name, right? And this old lady answered. I was like, "Yeah, I'm here for the Claw." But you know, that was what really tore me down. I don't know what the. I don't know, but I know that I have a friend who is a narcotics detective in Baltimore County, and he says he hasn't found heroin once in the last 2 years. It's all fentanyl, like 100%.
Yeah, it's that petty walk. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I escaped that one for sure. Because it's just killing everybody, man. But yeah, there's quite a few times where Mona has asked me, Mona is my daughter, where she's asked me why everyone in Baltimore is so sleepy all the time. I'm just like, hey, must have been at work all day. And it's bad. It's real bad out here. There's no other way to say it. Um, which is why I'm glad I do what I do, you know.
It's like certain areas, like, there's a cocaine thing, there's a crystal meth thing, but then the opiate areas are that's something
Yeah,
else.
opiates they have Baltimore in a chokehold. DC has traditionally been a place for PCP.
Yeah,
That
they love that wet out there.
yeah. So
Love the wet, which is strange.
yeah,
But
it's
relic
holding
of the
on.
early relic of the early '90s, still holding strong. And obviously LA was always big on the Sherm back in the day as well. So, but LA is just a cesspool regardless when it comes to substance abuse of all nature. So what was like the catalyst for you getting clean? What wound up? How the fuck did that happen?
Um, I mean, the circumstances are, I was on federal pretrial uh for some other wild ass shit, and um I kept prolonging that, and eventually they got tired of my bullshit, and were about to sentence me, and I asked the court if I could go to rehab for 7 days uh, to get off the methadone, and they said okay. And so while I was in that rehab, um, Narcotics Anonymous came in, and not saying that I'm a member of that fellowship, but that was the one that came in, and they had this message, and it was very interesting to me because it really wasn't about drugs. It was about this guy being jealous of his piece of shit uncle when he was a kid, because his uncle was always getting locked up, and the whole family would like jump up from the dinner table and go try to bail him out, and he said he remember being jealous of that attention, and that stuck with me. So um I went forward with that, got the methadone kind of out of my system, but they hooked me up with this therapist, and he was completely instrumental, because when I mentioned that I used to rap when I was in Boys Village, he was like, "Let me hear some stuff," and it was like weird, but I did, and he loved it. And he was a huge hip hop dork, and he would just make me rap in all of our sessions, and like that did something to me. It brought something back, man. So I just remember that I had something of value, and it made me feel good. And then I didn't want that to stop. And then eventually, I got out of the rehab, and then I had like 7 days until I had to go to court for sentencing. So uh, there was this 12-step fellowship that I did choose to attend, and I kept going to their meetings, and I liked what I heard, right? And I didn't want that to stop. And so on the day that I was supposed to go to court, I went to the hospital and I told them that I had some weird fucking disease, like a liver tumor on my brain or some bullshit like that. And whatever I could say to get them to check me in, right? Because I just wanted the golden ticket. Like, I'm sorry I missed court. I was in the fucking hospital. And so they were like, whatever. And so 2 weeks later was my next date. And so then I went, I had to go back to court for sentencing. And what do you know? I don't feel so good. Went to the fucking hospital again. I mean, it's just some total bullshit. Like, told them I had sickle cell, and they're like, no, that's not, that doesn't happen to white people. And, I didn't know any of this shit. I'm just making diseases up so that they check me in the fucking hospital. And it worked. And then, the third time, I had to meet my maker. So I went into one of those meetings and I was like, yo, my name's Steve. I'm going to prison for the rest of my life tomorrow. And I don't even
The rest
care.
of your life?
Yeah, it was some pretty heavy stuff. And so it was like 81 years. Maybe I would have lived, maybe I would have crested 100, but not at that rate, right? So um I
You like facing like you got is this murder or what?
no, it wasn't murder. Um so I'm facing, all this time, and then they wasn't rape either, just in case that
I
no,
know. Let's
yeah.
clarify that. There's no like weird like JCat sex charges going on
No,
here.
it was what happens when you have been an offender your entire life. And yeah, just one more of the same, similar to the charges I already told you about. Nothing outside of that box. And so
And also to clarify, when you talk about kidnapping, it's not with children involved.
yeah, no, that's just the word they use when you hold someone against their will while you're trying to extract certain pieces of information from them. Yeah. So there, where the fuck was I? Oh, so I said this. I went in the meeting, like, yo, I'm done. And I don't even care because I was off the methadone, right? At this point, I got like 60 days clean. And like, I had just surrendered. Lush, I was like, fuck it. If that's what is that new? That's not a new thing for me. I knew way more about being in a cell than I did about being out in society. And honestly, that society shit hadn't worked out too well, right? So it's like, fuck it. And this fucking Hell's Angels white dude comes up to me out covered head to toe in tattoos, and he's just like, what time's court? And it's kind of weird at first, but then I told him, right? And this is a federal charge, which is ironic. I'm from Greenbelt, and the federal courthouse is literally in Greenbelt. So it was like a Cherrywood Lane. It was weird. It was a short drive, but he came in this shitty ass pickup truck, fucking like lawnmower in the back, rusty, fucking, and like took me to court. And like I'm walking in, I'm just like, God damn, like I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I didn't really know what his motives were or anything like that. But we walked into the
I give
court.
you 90 years when they see this guy.
Right, exactly. They're like, oh, he's definitely guilty. But so I walked in, and the prosecutor who had been prosecuting this case for fucking like almost 2 years walked past me. She looked at me for like half a second, and then took this Hell's Angels dude into the conference room. Like, you walk in the courtroom, there's two doors on either side, and shut the fucking door. And so I'm just standing in the middle of this courtroom, like, all right, what the fuck is going on?
You
Uh,
feeling a little bit of hope at that point, though, I assume? Like,
no, it dawned on me that the federal government was so tired of me missing my court date that they planted a fucking agent inside of these 12-step rooms to
oh shit.
to make sure that I got to court because they were tired of me missing it. And I'm just like, God damn, like that guy was fucking convincing. Like they got him the pickup truck and all this other shit. And I'm thinking like, yo, those 12 step fellowships say we're not under surveillance anytime. Like they broke the law, or like, I'm just going in my head, like, what the fuck? And so then she just walked out of the room and went to the front of the room and called my case and just threw the whole thing out. And I was like, what happened? And they just called the next case. And so the Hell's Angel guy He's like, let's go. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then we just walked out. I'm like, yo, what happened? And he was like all nervous and weird. And then we just got some coffee in the cafe in the courtroom. And then we walked out. And I was like, hey man, what the fuck happened in there? And he said, I can't say the name of the fellowship because that's against our traditions, but she said, um, are you a member of this fellowship? And he said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I fucking knew it because as soon as I saw him, I could tell that you guys had gotten a hold of him. My son was in that fellowship and we celebrated his third year clean and then he died. So I'm going to give Mr. Hall another chance. And I've been clean since that fucking day. And that guy's still my sponsor fucking 13 years later. So
Shouts to him, man.
yeah, he was not a federal agent, far from it. But in my mind, I'm putting it all together and I'm just like, I couldn't
Right.
make sense of it. But yeah, it was just that, man. I mean, and that's what they say by grace, unmerited favor, man. Good God, Lush, they would have, if I had to pay for all the things that I actually did do, so, I don't like
Yeah.
poking that case with a stick in a public way, man, because that one was a real close call. I'm just glad that it's over, and I'm glad I
Double
get to.
jeopardy, baby. They can't touch you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what something that a lot of people, when people hit me up struggling with substance abuse issues and want to get clean, one of the most frequent questions I get asked is about the detox, the
Sure.
physical aspect of how did I detox? What's the best way to get clean? What was your detox like?
From 120 milligrams of methadone. Um, it's long.
That should take months, right?
I don't think I slept till day 40. Yeah. And yeah, it was grueling and it sucked and all this other shit. But yo, like, was it worth it? Are you fucking kidding me? That's the tough part is you don't get to see where it goes. And you don't have any reason to believe that there's anything good waiting for you on the other side. Because if you're me, every time you've tried to do to do something, it never ended anywhere else. You're just back in the same fucking spot. Um, I don't I don't want to tell the tale of withdrawal being so fucking horrible. Hey, childbirth's horrible too, but for most people, it's worth it. Right? So I don't want to scare people off of that. You're like, yeah, it's gonna suck, man, but it's not gonna suck as bad as staying in that shit. That's for sure. Like eventually, and I deal with that question a lot myself.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on? I mean, methadone obviously is a motherfucking trap, and is from my experience. Now, I've never been on it. I've taken it before recreationally, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But methadone is all bad as far as I'm concerned. And it seems like it's becoming pretty antiquated because nowadays there's Suboxone. And so, what are your thoughts on Suboxone, and what are your thoughts on kratom?
Glad you asked. Methadone's one of the biggest embarrassments in the American medical community, without question. Suboxone's not far behind it. Um, uh, Methadone is a very powerful opiate with a very long half-life compared to its counterparts. 30, 40 hours sometimes. Half-life just means how long half of the drug
It's
is
in your system.
metabolized, right? So yeah, and methadone was a largely a political response to all of the Vietnam vets coming back that were strung out on heroin from that side of the world, and it would placate their dependency on it while also drive down the crime rates associated with the illicit drug market. So, bureaucrats were a big fan of methadone in the 70s, and it kind of persisted. It wasn't from a treatment standpoint, it's a goddamn joke. And it doesn't prevent you from using other drugs on top of it. I will tell you that right now. I stood in that line for 3 years, right? So there's that. And then it's also, yeah, the withdrawal is so fucking horrendous. I remember this guy, he was standing in line with me in like 2009. He had been on methadone since the 70s. Dog, he was taking 1 milligram a day. That's wild. Just because of the psychological trap of that shit. And methadone, sure, it drives crime rates down, I guess. But I mean, you can go to the end of North Avenue here in Baltimore and see how successful it is, right? I literally own a fucking clothing line called Methadone. Check it out, methadone.com. There's a better fucking way. I want to say this loudly, man. Drug problems aren't a real thing. Society talks about drug problems. Bitch, I've never had a drug problem in my life. Drugs are a solution. They're just a really shitty one, right? Like the whole purpose of recovery is to figure out what your problem really is and then get some solutions in place that are effective, man. Methadone's certainly not the fucking answer. Suboxone had promise. Buprenorphine is the drug that's at the root of that one. It had promise in the beginning because it was prescribed as an acute intervention. It was prescribed as a way to lessen the withdrawal symptoms of an opiate addiction, and it was effective at that. I did take that in the end of my road. It was like you had the emergency break the glass Suboxone. It was a pill back then. It wasn't this film shit. It was like, all right, the jig's up. It's time to get fucking clean. Take this pill. It puts you in something called precipitated withdrawal, where it just evacuates all the opiates off the receptors, especially the 6 receptor off the fucking brain. You feel like shit, but it did kind of stabilize people. It's like a reentry tool. And then the motherfuckers went off the rails, dog. Now Suboxone is prescribed chronically.
Bro, I have a homeboy
Yeah,
who's been on Suboxone since 2001.
yeah,
He got to be in the motherfucking Guinness Book of World Records
yeah,
for real, please believe it or not. Literally 22 years
yeah.
on buprenorphine. Like
It's absolute criminal. And the reason why none of those, so they have their purpose, but once money gets involved, like that purpose gets obfuscated rather quickly. I remember they used to put me in group therapy at the fucking methadone clinic. Word? Think that's effective? They put me in a fucking group therapy for half an hour at 5:30 in the morning while I'm waiting for my methadone. How much do you think is going to sink in? Um,
right.
and then the Suboxone stuff. Yeah, now it's prescribed chronically. Now, I mean, the target dose for that shit goes up by about 4 milligrams every year. They're fools out there taking 30 milligrams a day, and they don't know any better, right? And so, or sometimes they do, but they just don't have the fucking push to do something different, man. Like, I
That's
also want to say,
a different definition of the phrase "orange is the new black."
sure. So here's the thing: if anybody's watching this and they're stuck on that stuff, yo, I love you with all my heart, and I'm not saying anything bad about you whatsoever. My disparaging remarks are directed at the companies that float this shit as this panacea, right? Like, addiction isn't a medical. It's not. Yeah, it's a disease in the abstract sense, but it's not. It's not a fucking like medical condition. Like, there's no pill for it, right? Like, that's not real. And yeah, I frequently draw the ire of my contemporaries for saying that, but I'm not going to not say this shit. Like, that's not. It can reduce this and reduce that, sure, but that's not the answer.
What about
Methadone is not a way of life. Suboxone is not a way of life, right? The thing that I am a huge fan of right now is something called Sublocade. Now, Sublocade is a subdermal injection of buprenorphine that lasts for a whole fucking year, right? And you get an injection every month,
muscle pop it?
huh?
Like muscle popping?
Subdermal injection. I know that that's the medical term for it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it has to be administered by a licensed provider. It's not something you do yourself. So, uh, and I've seen great results with that, because what happens is it takes away the rush. It takes away the immediate gratification. You don't feel it, right? And then people are able to stabilize, and they kind of watch it uh go down gradually, like the levels, and they're able to find a way out of that hell. I don't want anyone to be subjected to the horrors of opiate withdrawal. That's not a wish that I have. It's just um like methadone and Suboxone primarily, they've been out long enough for us to see how much of a fucking joke they are. Like, you still have to be the
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
wrestler.
toxin, substrips, and buprenorphine. If you it's a regular person, you'll get fucked up if you take it. Like
Straight
it's
up.
pretty much yeah. What are your thoughts on kratom?
I don't know what it is.
Okay, you've heard of it though.
Yeah, my buddy loves it. Yeah, I got a friend that he just eats it out of a spoon on a regular basis. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's. What do you mean? What are my thoughts on it?
What are your thoughts on it? Like, do you
I
believe
mean,
that as far as its ability to help people get off of opiates, do you advocate for it or
no comment. I
okay,
don't know. It's certainly not prescribed in a clinical sense. That would be
right?
the things that I could comment on. Sure. I mean, if it helps, okay. I don't know anybody that is living a successful life that's taking that shit on a regular basis, but that's just my experience. My circles don't blend with those.
I've seen it actually lead to some pretty gnarly relapses as well. So
You don't say.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hear you 1000%.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your experience like in early recovery?
Um, I'd like to think that I'm still in it. That's fucking. That's how I kind of like to keep my head screwed on about the recovery thing. I don't want to ever feel like I'm old to recovery, but in the beginning,
You've had
man.
13 years now, damn near.
Yeah, yeah. September 1, that'll be 13 for us, man. Uh, music sounded good again, and food tasted great again, which is why I got fat as fuck. And yeah, I mean, I started to learn how to feel my feelings, and I learned what the problem really was, man. I didn't have a fucking drug problem. I had a billion emotions and zero tools. That is the equation for addiction. I have a surplus of emotions and a deficit of tools. And when I use this thing, it doesn't hurt as bad. For a little while, I don't care about the consequences. That's it. That's the equation. It's not blood, it's in my blood, or I was born. Addiction's a family disease. Oh, I mean, sure, maybe if I didn't model this. Now, let me qualify myself because we didn't get to this part. That therapist that told me to rap in his sessions all the time told me that I should become one. And I fucking listened to him. So I went to college. I had 90 days clean and I graduated. And then I fucking went back and I graduated again and I kept going. And I became a board certified psychotherapist and I went to work for the federal justice system. And I held that post down for 7 years. And in that was a lot of work. And that was where I was working right when I met you. I
Right.
had to message you.
2015.
Yeah. So and that started to come to an end. But yeah, then I did the battle rap thing for a while and then I signed a record deal and that came out of nowhere. So I left the field and I started the Gray Smith stuff. And we did that shit and we got to do some super cool stuff in the Kennedy Center and rocking with Wu-Tang and doing all kinds of cool. I mean, you saw the whole thing fucking happen. They put my
Oh yeah.
face on Times Square and it was just like, here we go. We've arrived. We, blah, blah, blah. Booked this big ass fucking tour. South by Southwest, like all these bucket list things, headed back over the ocean, fuck with those don't flop guys. Um, see them and play some shows over there, and just here we go. And then in January, I get a message from the guy at South by Southwest about a weird flu going around that we got to watch out for. And we all know what the fuck that was. So
That's
I
17 plus two.
I saw my whole life crumble. And then I saw all the creative people in my corner who had their own careers lose everything. If we can't play shows, anybody out, young kids at home, if you think Spotify is going to pay your fucking bills, no, it won't. A million plays on Spotify pays me like almost $3,000, right? Like that's not living money. That's certainly not raise a baby money, right? So shows are how you pay those fucking bills. And so it all fucking fell to pieces. And then I saw that. And then so I asked myself, what now? I went to the psych ward. The day that I got 10 years clean, I went to the psych ward because I was fucked up. I didn't know how to make sense of where my life was. And I went there and I lasted for 4 days before I walked out. And I was like, these people have no fucking idea how to help me. And I said, what if there was a place for the
So
create?
okay,
Yeah.
just to clarify for people, you're at that point 10 years clean, 9 years clean, um, have lived a pretty successful life, already gotten already gotten your degree to be a clinical therapist. Life's going well. Again, feelings having success as a recording artist,
Yeah.
has some success as a battle rapper. Life is good. You're happy, and due to the pandemic, everything gets stripped from you in your eyes as far as your momentum
Yeah.
and what you have going on, and you wind up a decade into your recovery back in you're back in the nut house, for lack of a better
That's
more.
exactly what it was. And the patients weren't the only nuts there. They were saner than some of the staff members. And it was, it's this big facility up here in Baltimore.
It's just like, to me, like, this makes me feel so like seen and empowered, because me, 3 years into my recovery, wound up, or I guess it was 2.5 years into my recovery, wound up at my lowest point ever, and was wanting to end it all, and felt like I lost everything and it burned my life to the ground, just as bad as when I was in active addiction in certain ways. And here I
Certainly.
am
Yeah.
in certain ways, absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't have survived and still been around now, 3.5 years into my recovery, fighting to get to the next level, but I'm still kind of bearing the scars of what happened during that time. So it makes me super relatable. It makes me feel
Sure.
a lot better and less of a fuck up for
Oh, life
feeling.
doesn't stop because we stop using drugs, man.
I felt like a fucking failure, that I'm supposed to be doing so well and everything got fucked up, and I have no excuse now because I'm clean.
Well, be me, you know, 10 years, so it was September 1st, 2020. The day I got 10 years clean, I checked myself in because I was going to kill myself. I'll be completely fucking frank about that. Right. That it was dark ass year. I couldn't put two things together to figure out what my next step was. And then the mental health stuff. I mean, I'm not unique for going through mental health struggles during 2020. God damn, right? I mean, that year started with us losing Kobe in a fucking helicopter and just got worse from there. And that's a steep cliff to dive off of, right? So, um, 10 years clean, check myself into the fucking psych ward as a therapist, bro. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can connect to the feelings of like failure, dog,
And oddly enough, that's the year I got clean.
Yeah, right on. So, this shit wasn't going good, man. So I don't know. I got through, I leaned back on that fellowship, man, and like they got me to the next place where my brain kind of rewired. I was dealing with some like med changes and shit. Um, and yeah, fucking, I asked myself, like, what if there was a place where the creatives could go? And that was just idea that just stuck with me, man, super hard. And one thing led to another. Me and my baby sister kind of teamed up on the idea, and then we met some other people, um, um, one of whom was that therapist that I had so long ago. And we opened up a place called Glass House. And yeah, that's what I do today. Glass House is in its second year, and it's become fucking amazing, man. And it's a thriving facility. You don't have to be an artist to come to Glass House. We know you well if you do, and we're an outpatient facility that deals with the intersection between mental health, drug addiction, hyper brilliance, hyper creativity. Yeah.
Crazy, bro, because like the determination that you possess is so immense. Because seeing you execute this, when I remember talking to you when you were conceiving this, and I believe at the time you were working at another facility.
Yeah. Yeah,
And you
that's Jesus.
yeah, and that was like a federal facility, I think.
Nah, it wasn't federal. The feds got involved because I invited them in. I released that song called "All My Friends Are on Heroin," and I just released it on Facebook, and it made a whole bunch of fucking noise, and it made this lady reach out to me and ask me to be the director of her job because their director was on the way out. So I took the fucking job. Reluctantly, I lasted a month before I called the FBI. It was disgusting. I had two fatalities while I was there. Um, they were stealing the food stamp cards from the mentally retarded patients. Like there was a section for like Down syndrome. They were stealing their benefits, going shopping with their money and shit. It was, and I was like, yo, no way in hell. This is my first foot back in the field in like 5 years. And I was disgusted. And I called the fucking FBI and a whole bunch of shit happened. They ended up escorting my sister off the property because she worked there too. And that was part of the deal. I said, I'll fucking take the job if you hire my little sister. And so, yeah, I went to my mom's house where Jenny was, my sister. And my mom was just like, yo, if those idiots can run a facility, you should just open your own. And that was like the first kernel of the idea. But here's the thing, as a therapist, I'm good and I'm even great on some days for the right people. But as a businessman, I'm a fucking idiot. I have no idea what business is like. I have a whole bunch of knowledge about clinical stuff, whole bunch of knowledge about how to gain weight successfully. If anybody needs help with that, hit me up. I got all the fucking cheat codes for that. Losing it, not so much. And I know how to make an awesome record. What I don't know how to do is anything business related whatsoever. So there was this missing fucking piece there, man. And I ended up getting linked up with this woman named Sarah, who was running a biotech company down in Florida. And she ended up being the final piece that we needed to get Glass House off the ground. So she moved. She's originally from Baltimore. She moved up here, and she is everything that I am and a lot of things that I'm not. Most importantly, that she is a master in the world of business. She has an MBA. She founded a biotech company when she was still in college, pushed a whole new drug through the FDA. And yeah, I'm proud to be her fucking partner, and I live in her shadow on most days. And that's really cool. I'm glad to have her for sure.
Absolutely amazing. So, and you're being pretty modest because Glass House is immensely successful, and you guys are doing great, and
Yeah,
are thinking about even taking the operation steps further. And it's amazing to see and super inspirational, and it's
sure.
something I've wanted to get involved in myself. Getting my own foundation to help people in different ways. So it's dope to see how achievable it is if
Sure.
you actually connect with the right people and form the right team and
Well,
execute.
yeah, and just get that, and like I say the word business because like that part has to be dealt with, but like that's not even remotely our driving force. Glass House is successful as hell because people are getting better, man. You know what I mean? And like we have patients that have been there for over a year. And no one's there because they have to be. We don't do that. Our whole census is full of people that want to be part of that community and are getting better, man. It's really cool to see. It's the coolest group of people I've ever been a part of, for sure. And yeah, um, it has yet to feel like a job. That's for sure.
When I look at the apex of recovery, it's the marriage of the pyramid that we look at as mental, spiritual, and physical fitness. Now, you got the first two down, the mental and the spiritual. That's sometimes harder for other people, but
Yeah.
recently you've embarked on a journey to step up the physical side as well. And you just last weekend completed a motherfucking Ironman challenge. Can you break down that journey for the people?
It's crazy to hear that. Yeah. So I had Madflex, who, anyone from the battle rap community is going to be familiar with him, obviously.
Fire ass battle rapper, even better person.
Yeah. We do this thing at Glass House called the Glass House Pro Series. And that is, when people from the world at large tap in either in person or via a platform like this to speak to us at Glass House and all the patients. And so back in November, I saw Madflex had completed his Ironman, and it was something that just blew my fucking mind. So I was like, bro, please, can you tap in and speak to our folks? And so, like, very next day after completing the Ironman, he tapped in. It was a tremendous fucking group. And then he, gave a lot about the story, and there was all kinds of, he's such a natural at that kind of stuff. Like just communicating like the journey part of it and like the resiliency angle and all that. So we got to the Q&A part, and then one of the patients was like, what's an Ironman, right? Because I forgot that like neither one of us had really explained in detail what that was. So he said 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, 26-mile run, back to back to back. And like the whole room was like, oh my God. And like everyone was acting all fucking weird. And then I was like, haha, I
So
know.
he did the whole presentation and that wasn't mentioned at
Well,
all,
I
or
don't think we had. They all knew it was swim, bike, run. I just don't think anybody had mentioned the actual distances. And when he said the fucking distances, like everyone was like, just erupted, like, what the fuck? And then I jumped in there on some like, haha, funny fat guy shit. And I was like, yeah, I could never do something like that, right, gang? And like, everyone was like, yeah, never. And it might have been my lowest day as a therapist. Uh, on my way home. That was a dark drive home. I realized that in that moment of me just trying to be this homogenous member of the group, that I abandoned my post, which was to inspire these people to reach beyond their limits, especially the ones that they put on themselves. And I jumped in the fucking bag and I was like, yeah, I'm incapable of doing something amazing. And I hated that I said that. So I fucking signed up the next day. And
well, is it to add insult to injury that they all agreed with you? Like, yeah, there's no way you can fucking do this.
No, they didn't agree that I couldn't do it. They agreed that they couldn't. But that's how it sounded just now when I said that, and I realized that, yeah, I would have fucking discharged any one of them. Like, fuck you, me. But no, I'm sure they did. I mean, there was nobody in that room that would have put money on me being able to fucking complete it. So the next day I came in, I took my fucking shirt off, and I had everyone come into the group room, and I said, take a fucking picture of me. And then I signed up, man, and I trained for a fucking long time. And then on July 2nd, I had the whole facility all come up in the wagon up to Penn State University. Madflex flew out. We're doing this thing. I got a whole team together. There's a bunch of guys on the team, custom tri suits and all this other shit. Hotels and brand new bikes and just this big. It was this big fucking fanfare. I got out there and on what ended up going down in history as one of the hardest Ironman courses ever. I made it 50 out of 56 miles on the bike, and they pulled me off the course for time. And it was because I well, the real it was because I hadn't trained enough, but that bike course was in the fucking mountains. So much of it was just climbing hills, and I just was not prepared for that. Um, And so I got something called a DNF, which is a did not finish, which is basically the way my mind interpreted it was failure piece of shit. And
Right.
so, and I had all these people up there to like cheer me on the run, and I never even made it to the fucking run. Um, and it was brutal. And like, meanwhile, Matt Flex is like, I'm going so fucking slow on the bike on these hills that he's like, I'm gonna go ahead and scout out the territory. I'll see you soon. And he would just like ride the fucking mountain like it was nothing, and then like come back and be like, all right, man, let's get this done. Just such a fucking like, yeah, he continues to blow my mind. But anyway, we got pulled off the fucking course. And if anyone checks Mad Flex's Ironman records, anytime that you see him going as slow as I am, know that it's because he's a good friend of mine and he could have fucking gone twice as fast if he wanted to. So we DNF'd that one because he was riding with me, right? And um pulled me off that fucking course. And I came home and I was like, yo, all that fucking work and like all of this shit, and I didn't fucking bring a medal back to Glass House. So I signed up again, man. Like immediately, I found one that was 3 weeks away, that was in Ohio, that had none of that climbing on the bike. And Mad Flex met me in Ohio, and we got the fucking job done. And that, yeah, it was 7 days.
To the Midwest for being so fucking flat.
Shout out to the pancake middle of the country for being so flat. Got the job done, and it was the second hardest thing that I have ever done.
The first hardest would be getting clean.
No, getting clean was one of the easiest things I've ever done. Yeah. No. No. Yeah, not that. But uh barely finished. And just for reference, the thing that I did is called a 70.3, which is half of an Ironman, right? So that's 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, 13-mile run, which still is a fucking, like, for someone like me that's never done anything like that, is absolutely mountainous. So
A 13 mile run in and of itself is no walk in the park, motherfucker. But what was the most difficult section of that for you?
So I went into it with an injury on my hip, and I just tried to pretend like it wasn't going to happen, but got the swim done, got the bike done, and then as soon as I got on my feet to run, I just didn't have it. Is my legs were so fucking blown out from the bike, and then I just kept run walk through the first 3 miles, and then it did get a little better, but now at this point it's like 98 degree, it's not, it ain't optimal running conditions. So I forget what the official temp was. Hot as a bitch, thick as a bitch. And then like we kept going, man. And then like at mile 6, it started pouring rain, which was a pro and a con because they cooled it off, but now your shoes are all squishy. Um, and I'm hallucinating at this point because I hadn't slept. And you never sleep the night before a race. It's just how it goes. And so yeah, I'm out there slogging it along, and Flex is like fucking literally giving me pills. Like, so you take these salt pills on the course to make sure you don't lose your electrolytes. And he's like, every 15 minutes, he's just like taking care of me, getting it done. And then I made it to mile 12. We can hear the finish line, bro. Like we can hear the PA, and the people cheering and shit. And
Well, you're sure that those salt pills weren't crystal meth, right?
positive. And so I can hear it, and I just didn't have anything left, man. I didn't have it. Um, and I felt that reality. I just couldn't feel my fucking legs, but but they were in pain, which made no sense to my fucking feeble mind at the time. And yeah, I didn't have what it took, man. I made it 12 out of 13 miles. So basically 69 out of 70 miles. And I just didn't have, my body just couldn't handle it. And I was about to fucking give up. And Flex was like, man, fuck that shit. He took his hand and just put it on my back, bro, and just started pushing me up the fucking race course. And like we're running like slow as fuck, but he just would not let me lay down. And then we got about 400 yards from the finish line, and he just fucking got under my arm and carried me across the finish line straight up. Like, yeah, my finish picture is me being held up by him. And yeah, it yeah fucks with me in so many ways. um what an amazing experience, and the metaphors that were there, because then I got to bring that medal back to all the patients, and um I got to tell them a story about, make sure you bring a friend, and make sure you understand the importance of being able to have somebody that you trust, that you can lean on in the darkest, most challenging moments of your life.
It's
um
also like that footprints in the sand God metaphor,
yeah,
like
Matt Flex is my Jesus. That's oh,
beyond like whatever force is working through him. But that's that's an amazing story, bro.
yeah. And so um there were some things I learned about that. um and I got another one coming October 21st, and I'm going to do better than I did in this one. And I'm going to have to get through this one without him, which um it's going to make me very sad, Mad Flex. But
You'll be all right.
the event sold out before he got on board, so now we're fucked, but we're going to get through it.
Maybe in a couple years I'll join you myself, and then you can
Oh
carry
yeah.
me across the line.
Hey, I'm here for you, brother. Let's get it done.
Um, you I had a post I made recently, which is a clip of me and my buddy Trap Nine chopping it up about the importance of self-love and deriving esteem from within, and how
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah, I saw
really
it.
has
Yeah.
the longevity. I saw you comment on there actually, and wanted to get your thoughts on that because you just mentioned the importance of friendship and camaraderie, which, as we know, is a cornerstone of recovery if you're trying to be in it for the long term. But
Sure.
what about what about those moments when there is no esteem from outside and you have to rely solely on yourself?
Well, you just hope in that moment that you've shown yourself what you're made of when it matters, like having those people around you to support you. Like, I mean, that's a luxury and it's a vital necessity sometimes. But I think one of the biggest transformations that I've gone through, man, is, um, I mean, because sure, I grew up with that. I don't give a fuck what people think about me. Yo, anybody that says I don't give a fuck what people think about me, they're either lying or they're an android. You're supposed to. That's woven into who we are. It should matter what other people think of you. That's how society works, and that's how we evolved. The reason why we carry this big, deep fear of rejection is because that is in our DNA. Addiction is not in our DNA. That's not real. But the desire to be included certainly is, because back in the day on the plains, if you get excommunicated from the tribe, you don't fucking eat and you die, or you get picked off by a lion or whatever the fuck, right? So that is in us. That is evolution. And so it's not wrong to want to be included. Where it starts to become maladaptive is when the opinion of the pack matters more than our opinion of ourselves, where we are devoid of any self-portrait in an accurate sense, right? So, and that's what humility really is. Humility is a keen awareness of the good and the bad, the things that we are good at and the things that we need to improve on and get better on, right? And so that's something that I've been able to cultivate with the help of that Hell's Angels guy, James, who's my sponsor, and that fellowship at large, man, and the steps that are there. I won't tell anybody to pick a fellowship, but like pick one with a a deep, robust body of literature that has a path to working the steps, and not some shit where you work the first three steps over a fucking cup of coffee. That's not real. That's how you die. And so that's what I'll say about that one. But I just, um, I've come to like, there's things I don't like about myself still, man. But that's okay, because the thing that was missing my whole life was a solution. I know exactly where to turn when it's time to, pick the chisel up and start to carve out, a more clear version of me, man. And I don't know what God's name is, but me and him or her, or they, them, if you want to keep it PC for the 23, God's probably a they, them. Sure. I don't care about the identity of God. I just care that it's listening. And I care that, even more so, that I listen when it speaks, and it speaks to me through other people, and
He
um,
definitely speaks through other people as well.
you know, I mean, my relationship with you, Lush, was I used to see you know, there wasn't much to glean from Lush, the host, with the one-liners, before the battles. It was when I started getting an RMBVA, and I would see how you would type. I would see your written word, that it really became glaringly obvious to me how brilliant you were, and how disingenuous, or sorry, that's not a word, disingenuous it was. Like, you would present this party boy to the world, but there was this brilliant guy that if you never seen you type shit, the public didn't know about that. And that was the first thing that intrigued me about you. And that's why I started writing you those messages like, yo, man, I forget what I said. We could probably look it up, but it was something like, fucking, hey, man, hope you're okay. And, the drug thing, if you want to talk about that, let me know, and I can't force that shit on people, but it's important to let people know that you're there and that there's like an alternative to that shit, man. I'm really happy that you got clean. You got clean on my birthday, bro. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, life doesn't stop because we put the drugs down. If anything, it gets more real. Now we got to feel it. I mean, that's my nightmare. My nightmare is not using drugs and not doing anything about why I use them. That's hell, right? Like, I got to address the things that made the drugs make so much sense in the fucking first place.
Yeah, I think that's once I stopped putting in the work because I got to a point where I was comfortable and the promises of recovery and things that, I was happy, I was doing well. And then I'm not saying that it's bad to be happy, but sometimes that happiness, if we're not careful, could lead to complacency. And I
Well, it
took
makes
my
the
foot off.
pain. It makes the pain. I mean, so listen, I hope that I get to the point in my life where I make awesome changes because of inspiration, but so far desperation has scored way more points in my life, right? And it says that money, property, and prestige will divert us from our primary purpose. I mean, that's etched in stone. And yeah, we get clean, we get fucking new teeth, we get a fucking girl, we get a podcast with a fucking weirdo, cucky LASIK motherfucker. And like, we're just like, yo, I think I made it. And it's like, all right, cool. But you're in a snake pit without any fucking tools. And like, that disease, it's not impressed. It's not. And it's worked every step I've ever worked. It's sat on every plane seat that I have. It's there. And when I say disease, I just mean that fucking portion of my brain and my spirit that's dedicated to watching me die. Um, and it's there. And it tells me that I'm a worthless piece of shit that can never complete a fucking Ironman ever. And that's why I sign up and I live to fly in the face of the things that it tells me because it sucks. And it's pretty fucking unimpressive.
Man, man, Steve, Coma, Gray, you are you're a continuous source of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Grateful to have you in my life. Grateful for our friendship, and I know that there's so much to unpack from this conversation that
Sure.
I'm excited to drop it on people. And this is merely scratching the surface. Hopefully, we can do more things like this moving forward.
Sure.
You gotta. I want you to treat the Lush World platform as an open forum for you anytime. Just let us know, and we here.
Yeah, well, shout out to what you're doing and the shining light on issues that matter. I mean, sure, I want to know who fucked who in what gang fight, that the rest of the world seems to be obsessed with. But I mean, like, who's gonna tell the people out there that are fucking, strung out on whatever weird ass drug that, like, yo, that shit's not cool, and you should probably stop doing that before you never grow up. Um, it's not the way to live. Be yourself. The challenge is like you got to put the drugs down to find out who the fuck that is. I'm Steve at glasshouserecovery.com for anybody watching this that needs to get something off their spirit. I'm there to listen. And yeah, I'll pull whatever string I can to get you to the next step. Drugs are trash. And then you put the drugs down and you find out what else you can get addicted to real quick if you're not okay with yourself, man. So shout out to you for the platform. Shout out to you for, shining light on mental health and punching that fucking stupid notion down that people that talk about their mental health are somehow weak. You know what's weak is a fucking man that never shows a single emotion in his life. That's weakness. That's the epitome of a pussy to me. I don't ever want to be that.
Yeah, you can't. You got to break the fear. Can't let the fear break us.
Yeah, man. I'm here for you, bro.
As am I for you. Thank you so much for your time. Incredible conversation.
Yeah.
Like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Reach out to my guy. He just dropped the email on y'all. I have that in the link in the description as well. And with that being said, we about this be all.